Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us with today's Green Infrastructure Overview. We're very pleased to have you attending this afternoon. We appreciate your busy schedule, so we'll try to get you a bunch of terrific information in an efficient format, and you'll be receiving communications afterwards when this is available in electronic recorded, so you can watch it again and share it as needed. This is the first of 3 classes we're sharing through our partnership with Colorado Stormwater Center. And my name is Frank Kinder, the Water Efficiency and Sustainability Manager for Northern Water. And our goal here is to provide trainings to the landscape, to municipality and other interested parties around wise water use in the landscape using innovative approaches. And we're doing this today through delivering our first bilingual virtual format using Spanish and English. And so we have some translators here, which will be providing that service in the English or in the language channel. And you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a sec. I'm going to introduce you to today's speaker, Jessica Thrasher, Education and Outreach Manager for Colorado Stormwater Center at Colorado State University. She has a bachelor's degree in sociology from Southern Methodist University and a master's degree in international development anthropology from CSU. Her role is dynamic with the Stormwater Center, providing education, certifications, and then she does a lot of outreach in the community. And she has a interest and passion in this topic, practicing at her own home as well. Multiple certifications, and I hope that you'll continue to participate in these trainings with us going forward. I'd like to stop here to make sure we have time. Jessica, would you like to take over and provide next steps?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Frank. I'd like to welcome everyone again. Just before we get started, since this is bilingual, want to be sure that everyone has chosen their preferred language on the toolbar at the bottom. There is a little globe and you need to select English or Spanish in order to be able to hear the presentation. You can also view the closed captions at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a little CC. You can turn those off or turn those on via these instructions here, the hide subtitle. And then if you are in the Spanish room, select mute original audio so that you can hear our translators the best. And Frank, I do have your slides. Do you want to jump back in?
I'd be pleased to do so. And one of the reasons that we're sharing this information today is that we serve a very large region of northern Colorado with the water supply. And so this is just a quick overview of who we are. We collect water in the Rocky Mountain National Park region in those large reservoirs you can see on the left. And then we deliver it through 13 miles of tunnel and provide it to 33 cities in this region, from Fort Collins down to Boulder and all the way out to the state line. Further, we provide over 600,000 acres of irrigated farmland this same water. And so our goal with the services we have here is to maximize the efficiency of doing so. Would you go to the next slide, Jessica? So if you're unfamiliar with Northern Water, in the last 3 years, we've launched a variety of services in support of what we're doing today. We have a campus here in Berthoud where you can come see wise water landscapes. We provide consultations to HOAs, businesses, and municipalities. So if you're in a community that could use our consultation service, which is free of charge, we welcome you to reach out to us. We also provide irrigation audits to establish a benchmark for water use in existing landscapes. Further, we can also help with future landscapes and understand ways to maximize designs for low water use. We have some tools available on our website under fact sheets and tools. We also provide grants to transition high water use landscapes to low water use and provide ecosystem services to support pollinators and other species. And then we also are helping cities plan for efficiency. There's a lot of growth in the region, and we want to be as responsible as we can with that growth to maximize the water efficiency, considering the drought we're in. And training and events are one of our feature services, like our program today. And we also provide an annual conservation fair, generally in the summertime. Once COVID is over, we welcome you to attend. It's generally in June. And then finally, we run a weather station of 23 stations in the region where we provide details to people who are providing irrigation at the most efficient format, watering to ET or below. And we would like you to visit our website, find out what we've got to offer, and then we would welcome you to future training events. Next slide, please. Some recent things we're working on is a markdown of the Sustainable Landscape Management certification from the Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado, which we're making affordable around $125 per person. It's a 4-hour class where you can learn some of the best methods for soil management, water management, and landscaping design and maintenance. You can find this through alcc.com. Next slide, please. And here we are today. These are 3 consecutive but also complementary trainings, and I hope you're excited to learn today what you'll be hearing about and then seek more information in the future. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Frank. We also included the Spanish interpretation here as well. You will be receiving all of these slides after the presentation along with the recording. The recording will also be available on the Northern Water and Colorado Stormwater Center websites. You are welcome and encouraged to share this information with others who may be interested in also learning more about green infrastructure. It's been a wonderful partnership with Northern Water. We're very excited that they are really seeking value in the green infrastructure topics and stormwater education, as well as providing this bilingual opportunity with our 2 wonderful interpreters here today, Teresa and Dea. In case this is your first training with us, again, I am Jessica Thrasher with the Colorado Stormwater Center. What we do is are having our mission of advancing stormwater management throughout Colorado by conducting practical research and providing education and training opportunities like this one. And this also, kind of as a side note for the training, all of the blue lettering that you see will be links. So when you receive this PowerPoint presentation, you'll be able to directly click on those links to get more information about each of those topic areas. In addition to the bilingual virtual trainings that Frank mentioned, we also have several certifications. One on stormwater control measure inspection and maintenance certification. These, the people who are certified are on our website and receive that training for 3 years. We also have the stormwater control measure design and design review certification, and both of those dates and links are there. In addition to our trainings and certifications, we also have a substantial amount of research and tools available for you. So I'd encourage you to visit our website to learn more. We also have an upcoming 2021 Colorado Stormwater Symposium, and I'll be going over what that's about at the end. In addition to Northern Water, I'd also like to thank the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment for supporting the Colorado Stormwater Center and these outreach efforts. So let's get started on our topic today of green infrastructure. We will have question breaks today, but you're also welcome to unmute and interrupt me at any point if you have a specific question. As we start today, it is actually so appropriate that we're having this green infrastructure talk. I'm in Fort Collins and it rained for the first time today, just a little while ago. And so it's very timely as we recognize the change in our climate, but it's always welcome to have the rain. As we start today, we're going to be talking about, why are we having this discussion around green infrastructure in the first place, starting with some stormwater challenges. What has stormwater management looked like in the past? What is green infrastructure? Why is everyone talking about it? What are some examples of green infrastructure in our communities? What are some benefits to doing green infrastructure, as well as some things to think about and potential limitations? Why isn't everyone doing green infrastructure all the time? So talking about those barriers that we see, potential water solutions. And then I love tools personally, and so I have a lot of tools to share with you today, as well as additional resources. As we get started, before we can talk about what the solution is, we need to start with what is the problem. And so we're going to kick everything off today with the stormwater challenges that we're seeing. The reason why we're having these increases in stormwater is due to urbanization. Urbanization, or the paving over of our landscaped areas as our cities expand has caused a lot of different issues. One of these being the removal of green spaces, decreased infiltration, whereas when it was vegetated cover beforehand, the water was able to soak into our landscapes. But as we paved over those surfaces, that water is no longer able to infiltrate and has caused an increase in the amount of stormwater that we're seeing. Here's a graphic to illustrate this. So you can see that from the natural ground cover, we only had 10% runoff. We had that 25 deep infiltration and then 25% shallow infiltration. As we urbanize, we see more and more runoff, even from just making small changes from a 10 to 20% impervious surface. Already there's 20% additional runoff. As we get to the bottom number of the 75 to 100% impervious surfaces, the deep infiltration has been substantially reduced. We're only talking about 5% deep infiltration, 10% shallow infiltration, and 55% runoff. Now, those are just a bunch of numbers. So how does that really relate to you and all of us? Well, if we have a change in our landscape that has 10% runoff to 55% runoff, that means we're having to deal with a substantially increased amount of storm water. So you can see this in a number of ways. This next illustration. As we have more runoff happening, so the water hits our roof, then it goes through our downspouts, hits our sidewalks, it's becoming dirty. So it's accumulating, potential pet waste. We have oil, fertilizers from over-fertilization, debris, and all of that is potentially running into our waterways, and also collecting in our streets, becoming more hazardous driving conditions. And so this is causing pollutants. That stormwater has increased pollutants in it, and then we're having issues with having to treat that dirtier water. Additionally, one of the other stormwater challenges we're seeing is climate change. In our region, we've seen in a very real way this year, drought. Drought is becoming less of an event that we see occasionally and becoming something that we are dealing with regularly. We're seeing multi-year droughts now, and we're trying to figure out how do we manage the amount of water we have with the increase in population that we have and receiving less precipitation overall. Additionally, with stormwater, we have wildfire. The intersection of stormwater and wildfire are extremely connected. This year, from the last year fires, I'm sure that Northern Water is very involved with this and can speak at length about it. But the way that the wildfires are impacting our water quality is that we're having more sediment run into our waterways. There's less infiltration because of those burn areas. And so increasing volumes of water are running down hill slopes and into our waterways. I'm not sure if you've heard about the Glenwood Canyon with the mudslides that we're seeing because the burn areas were receiving a lot of water and then causing mudslides. So water and climate change are very closely tied. As I was mentioning too, as we have increasing impervious areas, we have increasing amounts of flooding. This can be nuisance flooding, where we have more dangerous driving conditions, or we have basements flooding, or if you're trying to have a walkable city, that you're no longer able to have that because the sidewalks are flooded. Or these could also be catastrophic flooding. We even saw this earlier in the year with the Poudre Canyon, where there were several losses of life, tragically, in the Poudre Canyon because of that increased runoff in those burn areas. We also have channel instability and erosion. As we have increased volume of water coming down, this is cutting into our vegetated areas and making these channels. As water moves across a vegetated surface, it infiltrates. And those pollutants that were in that water are then absorbed into that landscape and trapped into that soil profile. The water that goes through that profile is then cleaner. So that vegetation cleans the pollutants out of the water, and the water that goes into our groundwater systems is then cleaned. When we have channel instability and erosion, water cuts through those layers, and those pollutants that were then trapped within those soil profiles are then re-released into our water. So then we have sediment in our water, but also those pollutants that was in that vegetation previously, thus lowering our water quality. And as I mentioned before, as that stormwater moves across surfaces and picks up all of that trash and debris, potentially E. coli from pet feces, and that deposits it into our waterways along with fertilizer, then we're potentially having issues around algal blooms. And these can pose hazards to human, pet, and aquatic health. Finally, stormwater challenges around equity. As we see more more climate changes, more increases in flooding, the vulnerable populations that we have are the most impacted. And so as we figure out what to do about our issues with stormwater and our stormwater challenges that we're facing, keeping equity at the front of our mind and ensuring that we're installing sustainable infrastructure that is really elevating these communities as well is of paramount importance. So what has stormwater management looked like in the past? And I'd like to start with the ways that we view stormwater. What does stormwater mean when you think about it? And stormwater, kind of looking at this graphic, the way that that has been treated in the past is really stormwater needs to be removed from properties as quickly as possible. And there were good reasons for this. You don't want water sitting against foundations. As water collects in urban areas, it poses issues of flooding. But it's also been seen as this waste product and really not seen as something that we can utilize to our benefit. Stormwater management has really been isolated. You're looking at this issue kind of in a silo, not connected to other municipal areas like water conservation. Really just looking at stormwater, how can we reduce the amount of water that we have sitting in our streets? How can we get it away from our community as quickly as possible? And so I'd like to talk about what gray infrastructure is, since we're talking about green infrastructure today. So to make that contrast. Gray infrastructure, if you're thinking about it, is really about starting at the top. So let's talk about a roof line. A roof line, you don't have it, you don't have a pervious area. So it runs off of your roof into your downspout, as you can see from the picture on the left, and then onto a curb. Then onto our sidewalks and our parking lots. This is all just running directly through. And then into our curb and gutter system. Many of you may have also seen these illustrations of no dumping drains directly to the river. So a lot of times our stormwater goes from the roof directly into these storm drains, which go to our rivers and streams. So what we mean by green and gray infrastructure is that there is not any vegetation allowing infiltration happening. It's all concrete, it's all hard surfaces. Infiltration is not able to pass through gray infrastructure. One other very common type of gray infrastructure is the extended detention basin. And you might be wondering, well, it can't be all gray because I see green right there. And you're right. There are abilities for water to infiltrate when there is this grassy basin. But there is also a lot of concrete involved here, and the normal flows that we have would enter into the extended detention basin and go directly to the outlet, and all of that is concrete. The extended detention basins are settling out pollutants. It slows water down and collects it in this basin so that the pollutants can drop out of the water by this process called sedimentation. Typically, the extended detention basin holds water for about 40 hours and then releases it through the outlet structure. The third in our series will be talking in depth about the extended detention basins. And since these are the most common type of stormwater management that you'll find in Colorado, if you're an HOA, if you're a landscaper, even if you're a regular citizen, you're seeing these, but if you're an HOA, you probably own one. And then if you're a landscaper, you might also be maintaining these. So knowing what they look like and how they function and how you can keep them working their best are really important. So I'd highly encourage you to attend our final session. Before I move into green infrastructure and getting into depth on what that is, I'd like to just pause a moment for any questions. You can put those into the chat, or you can unmute and ask me directly. And if you don't have any questions at this time, but think of one as I continue on, again, you can put those in the chat or unmute. Okay, so what is green infrastructure? Going to go through a little bit of terminology. I know there's a lot of words on here, a lot of text, but basically what low impact development and green infrastructure a lot of times are used interchangeably. So I wanted to talk about what the differences are between them. So low impact development is an approach to land development that works with nature to manage stormwater as close to its source as possible. These principles include preserving or potentially recreating natural landscape features, decreasing those impervious surfaces, so those sidewalks, our parking lots, and treating stormwater as a resource rather than a waste product. So these are the philosophies of low impact development. Green infrastructure refers to the systems and practices that use or mimic natural processes. So these processes include infiltration, evapotranspiration, and reusing stormwater runoff where it is generated. So because of those two definitions, you can see why they're used interchangeably. Additionally, green infrastructure solutions can be large scale or small scale. So from this picture, you can see on the left, this is a very large rain garden that's actually at the mall in Fort Collins. And then on the right is a small residential rain garden, which is actually from my house. So you can scale up or down these technologies. You can also use green infrastructure in combination with more traditional stormwater elements. So having a rain garden, but also having stormwater pipes. Green infrastructure is also looking at the intersection of multiple elements. How can we have infrastructure that improves the quality of life of our cities, but also protects the environment and has economic benefits? So it's really looking at the triple bottom line effect. Today, I'm going to be talking you through some different types of green infrastructure and giving you a very brief overview of each of these different technologies. To start with, the vegetated swale, which is an open channel to allow stormwater to infiltrate. So where you'll see these they can be next to parking lots. They are a U shape instead of a V shape. So the V-shaped channels that you see are actually irrigation, are for irrigation, but that's not what this is. A vegetated swale is to allow water to infiltrate. So this would be instead of a curb and gutter, the water would just go from the parking lot or roadway down a slope into that U shape so that water can sit there and then move slowly, allowing infiltration to happen as it moves along that channel. It reduces your runoff volume, so there's less water that's going into potentially the storm drain, not causing those flooding issues. You have better water quality because, again, that water is soaking into the ground and it's being purified as it's going through that soil profile. You are having additional green space available, which has multiple benefits. This can be used in your community when it's dry. It's just this vegetated area, enabling people to have more access to nature. It also limits the erosion that you have from water going quickly across a sloped surface by having it be vegetated, so that you're not having channel instability and erosion occurring. It also removes sediment, and that's another way that it provides better water quality. One of the limitations with this type of technology is that it does require quite a bit of space. And so that is just something to consider as you're looking for some alternatives for your stormwater. Next, we have a grass buffer, which is very similar to a vegetated swale, except that it is flat. It is a densely vegetated strip of grass that you want water to flow over in a sheet flow. And so it's just like it sounds. If you put a sheet on the ground and pull it, that's how the water would move. A lot of times they're used, that sheet flow is created through a level spreader, which is pictured here on the left. So what happens is the water comes across, and you can see by these arrows, the water comes across this sidewalk and then goes down. This is actually an open pipe. And so then the water fills up that pipe. And then once it fills up, it moves evenly across this grassy area. The difference between a vegetated swale and a grass buffer is that, I'll go back for 1 minute here. The vegetated swale is narrower, but longer. And so then it has that U shape, and the grass buffer is wider and flat. And so that is the difference between the two. It has the same benefits of removal of sediment and pollution, increased infiltration. You get that green space again, and also breaking up that impervious area where the water just transfers from your roof to the sidewalk, to the parking lot, to the storm drain. You're increasing your ability for water to infiltrate. Again, the limitations, you need increased space requirements, and you might need an underdrain. Next, a rain garden. A rain garden is a landscape depression designed to slow, capture, and infiltrate runoff. One of the great things, I could talk all day about rain gardens, and in fact I will for our next session, so this is just a very brief introduction to rain gardens. But what's really beneficial about rain gardens is you're using that stormwater as a resource. You're taking it as it's coming from your storm drain, and then enabling it to infiltrate, where it can also double as one of the benefits to your landscape. You can water your own landscape with the storm water, and so you're having kind of two benefits in one, actually three, because you're also purifying the water. And so you have reduced irrigation needs, you're having reduced runoff, and then also treating that water. So if you're going through and doing some planning for some projects, by having rain gardens and this type of green infrastructure, you can just have multiple check boxes for incorporating this type of strategy. Additionally, with rain gardens, you're able to, like I said, have that multiple benefits. And I just kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry on that. I'll come back to it. I'll remind myself of that. Limitations. One of the things that is causes rain gardens to fail is when they're incorrectly installed. So this is a picture of a rain garden being installed incorrectly. The reason why all of the water is being funneled to the center is because it has been, it was installed but sloped. So typically when vegetated areas are installed, they are installed so that the material goes to the very top of the sidewalk. And then they're kind of bowled inside of there. That you cannot do that with a rain garden, because the whole idea for it to remove pollutants is it has to be a flat surface where the pollutants are able to spread out, or the water is able to spread out equally across the entire rain garden and then soak in. When you have this type of rain garden that was installed with this bowl shape, then all of the pollutants, all the water are being concentrated in the center. And so then the plants that are on the outside of the rain garden aren't getting any water. And then all of the filter material that comes with the rain garden is being clogged right in the center. And this also shows improper maintenance as well. And then that sediment or those pollutants are being concentrated. Some considerations for rain gardens: the vegetation does have to be established. Once the vegetation is established, you do not have to water a rain garden because it's based on planting native plants that are acclimated to the types of drought and rainfall that we do get. You might need an underdrain. So an underdrain is when our soils can potentially not drain the rain garden as quickly as the water comes into that system. And so an underdrain allows water to pass to the storm system more quickly than it would with just the native soil. So in some cases, it might need that underdrain. And as you're maintaining your rain garden, you might have to, weeding is a part of that, and you might have to add or remove plants based on what plants were selected. As I mentioned before, our next session is September 1st on more details about rain gardens, and the registration link is right there, as well as a couple of examples of great rain gardens. One there at Library Park, and then the Mile High Flood District Urban Storm Drainage Criteria, Volume 3, has additional resources as well. Next is a green roof. A green roof is an extension of an existing roof, which has several different layers, as you can see in this graphic here pictured. You have a high quality waterproofing. So if you're concerned about a rain garden and then water coming through your ceiling, that won't happen because of this waterproofing. There is a root repellent system, a drainage system, a filter cloth, a lightweight growing medium, and of course, plants. Ideally, these plants are also native plants for the same reasons as the rain garden. You want them adapted to our climate. There are two different types of green roofs. One can be extensive. These are about 30 pounds saturated and 4 to 6 inches. These are the best for retrofits because they're lighter. If you, the next type is intensive, and these are deeper. They are over 8 inches. And 40 to 80 pounds saturated. So this type of green roof is best combined with new construction because they need additional supports in place. As with our other strategies, green roofs reduce runoff. They have the additional benefit of reducing heat island effect. These are very effective in cities where you don't have a lot of additional space to add in vegetation. Since you do have all of your parking lots and your sidewalks, utilizing the existing roofs is a really great way to reduce your heat island effect and without having to have that additional space, since it's so costly to have that additional landscape area in cities potentially. You're also insulating your roof. So you're having a lot of energy savings, which can get you LEED credits. It could potentially extend the lifespan of your roof. And as I mentioned, there's no extra space that you need since you already have your roof in place. Some of the limitations with the green roof, it could potentially have high installation costs. But I do want to just say that the life cycle cost could be lower. So when you're looking at the cost estimate, looking at that life cycle cost is really critical. With some of our green infrastructure, the upfront cost could potentially be higher, but over the life cycle of that infrastructure, they are lower overall. Supplemental irrigation is needed. In our climate, we will need that additional water initially to get those plants established. And then those costs with that initial establishment are also there. Here are a couple of additional resources on green roofs. Dr. Jennifer Busolo gave a presentation a few years ago on green roofs in Denver and how they're working there now. So I would encourage you to look at that resource if you're interested in learning more about green roofs. And also, again, the Mile High Flood District has some wonderful resources on their webpage as well. Next, we have permeable pavement. And permeable pavement allows water to soak and infiltrate between these pavers or between the layers of that material. There are 3 different types of permeable pavement. One is pervious concrete, then we have porous asphalt, and the 3rd type is permeable interlocking concrete pavers, or PICP, which is pictured here and is the most common in Colorado. The benefits of this one are it serves multiple purposes. Once again, if you're in a city and landscape, those real estate is at a premium, and you need a parking lot and you don't have room to have a large grass swale, by having the permeable pavement, you can have infiltration, you can clean the water, and have your driving surface as well. Having permeable pavement helps alleviate drainage issues because it's soaking in and not just sitting on the top of that pavement surface. Because it is infiltrating, you can have benefits to nearby tree health because they're getting that additional water as it soaks into the ground. There is not typically an ice issue on permeable pavement. We get ice when the water, when the snow melts and then it sits there and then it freezes. But with permeable pavement, as that snow melts, it soaks right in. So this is a really great strategy for not having ice on your parking lots. Again, you can get LEED credits for it. And this type of strategy can be used in combination with other LID practices. This is what this looks like going in, the permeable interlocking concrete pavers. Some limitations are they're not for use near sparse areas of vegetation where you could potentially have a lot of erosion happening and a lot of sediment running through your stormwater and then ending up on your permeable pavement, because a lot of extra sediment will clog your system, your permeable pavers. You can't do infiltration next to buildings, so putting the permeable pavement right next to a building is very difficult. So if you want to have a sidewalk potentially next to your building with it, you would need to have a lining so that it won't infiltrate and cause your foundation issues. You might need that under drain again. Maintenance can be challenging because it's learning a new system. You need to take care of it. You need to be really good about your maintenance so that it doesn't clog, because once it clogs, the only way to unclog it really is to pick up all of the bricks, remove all of the filter material, and then replace the filter material and put back the bricks. The nice thing about using permeable interlocking concrete pavers versus the porous concrete or porous asphalt is that you own those materials already, so that the replacement costs, if your PICP gets clogged, will be less than if you have to replace porous concrete or pervious asphalt, because then those costs would be the same, because there isn't a material that you're keeping. Those have to be ripped out and replaced completely. Examples, Mile High Flood District has some examples, and then Odell Brewing Company ended up using a combination of regular concrete and permeable pavement in the permeable interlocking concrete pavers for their parking lot. One of the concerns, they have large trucks making turns on their parking lot. And so sometimes one of the concerns with having this particular strategy is that they won't hold up to the weight of large trucks. And so what they did is that they had regular concrete where the trucks will be turning around, and then they had permeable interlocking concrete pavers in the rest of the driving area for cars. The best way to do, I'll just show you this really quick, the permeable interlocking pavers, the best pattern is this herringbone pattern, because it offers greater stability and you will not have issues with your with movement of your bricks. So by using those two types of strategies, you can really extend the longevity and of your permeable pavement. The next strategy are constructed wetlands. So a constructed wetland is a retention pond that has water consistently, and it's slowing down, but it's still slowing down the runoff that you have. so that the pollutants can drop out. This is artificial. So these are constructed by us. They are not natural wetlands. These are a stormwater feature that is designed to clean the water, but it's also a natural feature. And so you're having habitat, you're having these wetland plants. And so you're getting a lot of the natural benefits as well. But it's always, you have to keep in mind that these are not a natural feature and that they're designed to collect pollutants and that eventually those pollutants will need to be cleaned out. Some additional benefits in addition to habitat are that open space. I think, COVID has really shown us all how important the outdoors is and how critical having access to open spaces. And so having this type of stormwater feature, you're able to have your stormwater quality protection as well as open space and also flood control. One of the limitations with this and why we don't typically see a lot of constructed wetlands in Colorado is because of the water rights issue. You need to obtain a water right in order to be able to construct a constructed wetland. These can have debris in them, as well as algal blooms can be an issue. Since these features are trying to clean the water quality, one of the issues that we see are nutrients from waterfowl. So they're adding contaminants to the water. And then once these typically constructed wetlands will need to be cleaned out in 15 to 20 years. And when that happens, you have to dredge out the bottom of your constructed wetlands to remove all of the pollutants that have accumulated there over time. So when that happens, you need to do that during the winter time so that there's no endangered species that are being impacted, and then as minimal impact to the vegetation as possible, because there will be some reestablishment of that vegetation after it needs to be cleaned out. But 15 to 20 years, it does last quite a long time. Some considerations for constructed wetlands. Designed for maintenance, you need to be able to get the correct tools in to maintain the constructed wetlands. Otherwise, it's going to be very expensive and difficult to clean it out when that time comes. The next strategy is a tree box or a tree filter. And so this one acts very similar to a rain garden. And so it's collecting the runoff. It's typically next to a roadway or a sidewalk, and it's collecting the runoff and treating it before putting in that cleaner water into a storm sewer system. There are pollutants that are removed as it moves through that filter media. And then it also has, you can fill it with different types of media to remove a particular pollutant. If the area that is being treated, you have issues with something in particular. You're adding to the tree canopy and also adding the benefit of additional trees into your urban and suburban areas. Here is what one looks like that's been installed in Fort Collins. As you can see here from the arrows, the water enters in to this grate. It interacts with the filter media. And then if that tree box has already filled up with water, any additional runoff will go directly into the storm drain, which is right next to it. And then any of the water that is entered into the tree box is then required to go through the filter media down to the under drain at the bottom, where the purified water will go, or the cleaner water will go into the storm drain that it's connected right next to. This is really to treat small stormwater volumes, and you're also dealing with a tree. So you need to have an arborist come out to potentially check this tree, or that tree might need to be replaced if there is some issue with it living, if it has some infestation issues. When you're choosing a site for your tree filter, choose a site based on if the pollutants can be treated with a tree box. If there are really more smaller frequent storms, if it has that smaller drainage area, these would be good choices for having a tree box. For larger sites, you can have multiple tree boxes together, but that might not be the most cost-effective solution. So look at other green infrastructure solutions that might be able to be paired with a tree filter, so that you could do a more cost-effective strategy potentially. So there are numerous benefits of green infrastructure and low impact development. So we talked about multiple times, we get groundwater recharge. When we see storms and stormwater events where the water is not able to infiltrate and it's going directly into our rivers potentially, we're having a spike in that river flow. And then that water disappears. But when we are able to infiltrate our water into our groundwater, that water still makes its way to the river, but slower. So really, that groundwater is acting as our storage area, and it's keeping our river water there for longer. We have decreased heat island effects with our green infrastructure strategies, potentially lower energy consumption, especially with our green roofs. Reduced flooding, that's either our nuisance flooding and helping alleviate some of our catastrophic flooding when paired with our stormwater infrastructure that is already in place. Looking to manage stormwater as that resource, not trying to get rid of stormwater as quickly as possible, looking at stormwater as something of value that we can use to benefit our communities. Looking to stack functions, how can green infrastructure help build our communities, help build our economies, and also protect the environment? By treating and managing stormwater as that resource, we have decreased demand for irrigation, especially when pairing that with like a rain garden, and enabling our communities to have increased access to nature. So there are, again, numerous benefits to green infrastructure and low impact development. I'll pause here for questions before going into examples of green infrastructure. And you can unmute or you can put that into the chat. Okay, let's go into some examples of green infrastructure in the wild. When I am driving around, green infrastructure is all around us. And so I am one of the crazy people that stops and takes pictures of all of the different things that I'm seeing. And it's really interesting to see how different stormwater has been utilized in our communities. So one example that I want to share with you is the Vegetated Swale. So this is pretty close to my neighborhood. And I saw something interesting, and I wanted to share kind of this example with you. So the picture on the left, this is a beautiful vegetated swale. Vegetated swales do not have to have bluegrass. In fact, we would much prefer they be native grasses. So this one has been mowed, which is fine. A lot of native grasses it's preferable to not mow, but in just looking at how this vegetated swale is working, there's no curb and gutter. So the water is being encouraged to infiltrate. And then it's connected to a system of all of these different vegetated swales in this neighborhood. So it is an older neighborhood. And so this infrastructure, the curbs weren't put in. And so these more green infrastructure strategies were put in place. And you can see here on the left, it's paved. Another example, great example of a vegetated swale is on the right picture, where those native grasses have not been mowed. And this is on a dirt road. And so from the dirt road, you're going to get more sediment, more sediment going into that vegetated swale. But that vegetated swale is very healthy. That water is infiltrating. There are not drainage issues on this road because of how healthy that vegetation is. It's able to uptake that water and move it away from the road and then infiltrate it into this very healthy system. Okay, now we're moving on to the kind of case study or the example. So the neighborhood that I'm going to show you is a typical, we have the bluegrass, we have the curb and gutter on the left-hand side here. And then on the right, you see a lot more xeric, or in this case, kind of, I wouldn't call this xeric, I would just call this rock. And so as you kind of see this neighborhood, there are two distinct sides. The left-hand side is the bluegrass, and the right-hand side is this rockscape. And then there are other homes that have been using plants in addition to rock, just to set the stage for you. Okay, so I know this is a lot of pictures, but I wanted to make a point. So here, the one on the far left, that was the first picture I showed you of what a vegetated swale should look like. Term vegetated, right? It needs to have vegetation. As we're looking at the picture, the next one over, this was supposed to be a vegetated swale. You can see it has that same shape. It's angling in from the road, but that is all rock. And so let's look at, again, the third picture. It's looking at it from a different angle. You can see here that this was originally a vegetated swale, and then there was landscape fabric and rock put there instead of the grass. Okay, and then the next picture, you can see what's happened. When you put landscape fabric and rock, you get weeds. So you might be thinking that that is vegetated. That's still not vegetated. That's just weeds on top of the landscape rock and the weed barrier. So if you're starting to look at the far left-hand vegetated swale again, that's one house down from the next picture where it's all rock. So you can see what the intent was. The intent was that this whole neighborhood side had vegetated swales slowing down that water. But because of a lack of knowledge from the homeowners and this HOA of what a vegetated swale is, I think there were good intentions here. They were trying to reduce the amount of grass that they had in their yards. And so they decided to take out the bluegrass that was there and put in this rocked landscape. But what they didn't know that they would be doing is they would be causing more stormwater runoff issues because they're decreasing the amount of infiltration, and that they transitioned a green infrastructure solution into a solution that no longer works as intended. So as you are looking around, as you're seeing these strategies, as maybe your neighborhood is talking about moving, away from grass onto more rocked areas or more xeric, just make sure that you're not rocking over a vegetated swale and really thus inhibiting the ability of using that stormwater as a resource and having a benefit to the groundwater. So now all of the benefit of a vegetated swale has been removed in this particular case. We have a question of where do we typically see grass buffers? You can see grass buffers instead of like a vegetated swale in this example. You can see grass buffers next to play areas. The example I showed you earlier was next to a soccer field. And so when you have larger grass areas, there are still those parking lots around those recreation areas. And so by combining a grass buffer with a more recreation area or a play area in an HOA, those would be good spots for a grass buffer. Okay, the next example, here are some rain gardens in Fort Collins again. The left-hand side is a street rain garden. And so that is collecting that runoff as it runs right down the street. Instead of it going into a curb, it's being infiltrated right next to it. So you're having the ability of the traffic to be slowed down in that area, as well as the additional benefit of vegetation and slowing down that rain garden. So that's what the stormwater. So that's what a rain garden looks like when it's full. The next picture is after the storm, and you can see that there's a lot of buildup of material. So there is a lot of movement of material, of debris, of that sediment that's moving down our roadways. And this just shows you in a really real way the need for our water to be cleaned before it hits our rivers and streams. This particular picture, the middle one, shows that you need to clean that before the next storm, because otherwise it will not function as it should. And the water will actually not be able to get into this rain garden because there's all that sediment buildup right where the water is supposed to enter. So this illustrates how well this rain garden can work when it's being maintained properly. And the next picture shows that if it's not being maintained, it will not function at all. And so while we're thinking about how to, where to install our green infrastructure, we also need to be talking about how can we make sure that these are designed for success so that they will continue to function in the way that they should, and provide the benefits, all the benefits that they can bring us. This next picture, also in Fort Collins, it shows a different inlet. So this particular rain garden has, that's called a distributed inlet, and it is the far right picture where water from this parking lot can enter onto this kind of bottom side of this rain garden, but it has another inlet on the top. So you don't have to have just one inlet for your rain gardens. And then these are examples of rain gardens not working. The picture on the left, I had showed you earlier, and that is because it was planted in this bowl form. And then the picture on the right, how could you even tell that was a rain garden? It looks like rock. And that is because the inlet, that they're not letting water in appropriately. The appropriate plants were not selected. And so this rain garden never got a chance to be successful because it wasn't set up for success in the first place. Additionally, it's really better to use mulch instead of rock in rain gardens because that helps to, the mulch helps to build up the soil, whereas rocks, you'll have to clean out that sediment that accumulates in rocks, but they also don't break down or help the soil, and they also add heat to the plants, making it a little bit harder for them to survive. So these are don't do this with your rain garden. Here is a permeable pavement example. So this is a way that permeable pavers can be installed. They are in that herringbone shape that I said is a really great structural integrity way to install permeable pavers. And then also showing you on the far right how there's no ice on this, that as the snow melts, it goes right into the infiltration layer, and it does not cause ice buildup on your parking lots or on your walkways. Here is what it looks like when it's not functioning. So when you see this buildup on the left-hand picture of all of those tree debris, like leaves, on the top of your permeable pavers, that is when it's not infiltrating. So permeable pavers are supposed to infiltrate water at 20 inches per hour. If we were in person, I would ask anyone what they thought a typical rain event in Colorado was. Anyone? I would call on someone, but so typically, you know, if we had a 3-inch storm, that would be a huge storm for us. So a 3-inch storm versus 20 inches per hour. So permeable pavers should be able to handle whatever storm we get in Colorado typically. So when you see water sitting on top of permeable pavers, like in this example on the left, you know that it's no longer functioning how it should, and that filter material is clogged. Permeable pavers work, they don't last as long when you have a lot of tree cover around them, because that is how it gets clogged. So that's the example of one of the reasons why this permeable pavers failed on the left, is because of that, all of the debris accumulating on top, and pollen and leaves and that sort of a thing. Have a question here. Would the pavers support road traffic? like in this example on 10th Street in Greeley. You know, I would, for that particular one, I would want to make sure to have the appropriate people in the room to ask that question. What types of traffic do you typically see? What's the load bearing weight for those pavers? But I would definitely bring it up as an example. If permeable pavers are used and supported appropriately, they can handle a substantial amount of weight. And so in your discussions as part of the City of Greeley, great to see you, Deb, I would bring up the option of if this would be a viable solution for that area. On the picture on the left, on the right, this is a porous concrete. So for this particular solution, what happened here is a water main broke. And so when you are installing pervious pavement, you're not installing it to leave the site because the water is supposed to infiltrate. So when they had an issue with a water main break and they were flooded with water that had a lot of debris in it, it clogged up their pavement quickly. What they decided to do, luckily what they did is that they went out there and cleaned it immediately. Because they were able to clean it immediately, they were able to preserve the life of their permeable pavement, and it functioned at, you know, the 20 inches an hour rate once they had it cleaned once again. But if they had left this there instead of cleaning it immediately, then they would have had to replace the entire section that was pervious pavement. Before I move on to some barriers, are there any other questions on, you know, some of the examples I shared or things that you've seen with green infrastructure as you're driving around? Okay. So now that we know how great green infrastructure is, why isn't everyone doing it? Why aren't we seeing green infrastructure all the time? So let's talk about what some of those barriers might be to implementing green infrastructure. This was a survey done by Brightwater Engineers back in 2008. And they surveyed a lot of different folks from municipalities, contractors, and said, you know, why aren't you installing green infrastructure? And these reasons stay true today. So one of the big ones was performance, a lack of successful demonstration projects. So these projects, people think of green infrastructure as working potentially in other areas. We're not seeing them as much in Colorado. So there are a lot of very successful projects happening in the more rainy areas. And so, especially when they have combined sewer systems where their storm and sewer systems go to the same place. So what happens in those cases are that when there's an extreme storm event and their water treatment can no longer handle the stormwater, then everything is released into the ocean. It's combined with their wastewater and then it's just released. And that is not what we have here. Our storm systems are separate. But in the east, you know, they're looking at, they have to do things to control their stormwater. And so they've been doing green infrastructure for quite some time. But it's hard for people to understand that those same systems that work so well when there's an overabundance of stormwater also work extremely well here. This has been the lack of successful demonstration projects issue has really been taken on by the Mile High Flood District. They're doing an update to their manual, and they have a lot of projects and great examples of green infrastructure working well in our area. And so, and showing, you know, examples of what I'm just seeing driving around too, that green infrastructure can definitely be done. But this is one of the issues that we have seen with instituting more green infrastructure in our communities. There's also the reluctance to try something new. We know how to do curb and gutters. We know how to do extended detention basins. why do something different when we already know the costs that we need for these types of projects when we do kind of the typical gray infrastructure. We know the permits that we need, all of the things. We already have the contractors in place. And so trying something new and different, it's hard to get people to change that mindset. Additionally, costs. There is the idea that the design, construction, operation, maintenance, and life cycle costs are higher potentially with green infrastructure than gray infrastructure, which is not necessarily the case, but that is the perception, is that the costs could be higher or the costs are unknown. Whereas with our gray infrastructure, those costs are known. Maintenance requires new techniques and training. They already know how to install the curb and gutter system, getting all of the asphalt and the concrete put in place, but knowing how to put in green infrastructure, as I was mentioning with the rain garden, if you do not install it correctly, then it will fail. And so there are concerns around knowing how to maintain and install these strategies. Codes and ordinances can also be an impediment, where low impact development is recommended rather than required. And so we have a lot of work that we could do in making green infrastructure and low impact development strategies maybe not necessarily required, but looking at having them be more than just recommended. Additionally, there may be other types of stormwater infrastructure required even if you install low impact development. A lot of times they work really well together. And so there's hesitation to install some green infrastructure strategies because the thought is, well, I have to go ahead and install this great infrastructure anyway, so I might as well just keep with installing only great infrastructure. So what should we do about that? How can we address some of these concerns? So I don't know, I used to run track. And I'm not sure how many of you were watching the Olympics, but this is a picture of the steeplechase where they are going over the barriers. And I also thought this was a really appropriate picture because of the limited track record. So I figured Frank would appreciate my puns at the very least. So that was for you, Frank. So when we're looking at, the issues of performance, and having green infrastructure, what are those examples of successful projects? There are a lot of tools to show you those examples of green infrastructure working really well. And all of these, again, are links. And the EPA, I'm linking you to a lot of EPA resources that have done a substantial amount of research on this topic. So the triple bottom line cost benefit analysis that they have, that is the link to see that entire study. Additionally, the Mile High Flood District is organizing their chapter 4 of the Urban Storm Drainage Criteria Manual, and I have heard they're using increasing number of pictures and examples of case studies of these solutions working in our area as well. So that chapter should be out in 2022, and I look forward to seeing all of those great examples. The EPA also has another document on overcoming green infrastructure barriers, which addresses a number of these concerns and how to look past them and to be able to install the green infrastructure in your community. And as far as other solutions goes, really looking to improve our codes and ordinances. How can we encourage more green infrastructure practices? How can we have reduced times for permits if people are doing green infrastructure? How can we potentially reduce stormwater fees if they're installing more green infrastructure? What are ways that we can utilize opportunities to see more of these strategies used in our development? As far as the maintenance goes, the concern around new training being needed, around not knowing how to maintain green infrastructure. Well, I have great news. We at the Colorado Stormwater Center have a class specifically on how to do inspection and maintenance and installation of green infrastructure. So we can get around this issue and this concern of, well, we don't know how to do it and we don't know how to install them. We have those classes to go around that issue. And we're also working on making those classes more available by having them be online. So hopefully in 2022, we'll be able to offer these certifications online to allow more people the opportunity to take them. And then also the other issue of other types of infrastructure still being required with low impact development. Yes, that is still a legitimate concern of that could be necessary for your area. But as we move forward and as we think about ways to design our communities for sustainability, it's not only having to install one type of stormwater infrastructure isn't necessarily as important as looking at how are we making our communities more sustainable. How will this infrastructure serve us in the years in future? How will be able to be more climate resilient? So yes, that is a concern, but also I think we can find a way around that. When looking at these policies and regulations, I've already kind of mentioned the expedited review process. There's also a lot of cost sharing grants if you're looking to install green infrastructure or recognition programs of communities and developers that are doing it right. You know, that helps them. But I really think as far as developers go and developments, contractors really saying, you know, reducing our fees and expedited the process. I think those are two really great strategies that we can use in our land use development moving forward. So here are just some examples looking at what gray versus green infrastructure looks like right next to each other. So here are inlets. This is where the water is coming in. We're looking at how quickly is stormwater moving from its source to the river. So here we have the rain garden inlet. You see how the water's being slowed down and infiltrated. The next one, you see a vegetated swale where that water is moving across that vegetation and infiltrating. And then you have a traditional stormwater inlet and curb system where that water is being directed to run off into the drainage area as quickly as possible into the pipes and then into our rivers. Here are some examples of some planters in our cities, you know, beautifying our streets. There's been a lot of work around that in Fort Collins and Denver areas and other communities as well. But as you can see, beautifying your streets can also look like a below ground planter where this is a rain garden. So you're wanting to add more vegetation, but also having that dual function of purifying our water and reducing our amount of stormwater versus the one on the right where it has our above ground planter and you're having to then water that planter using additional water resources, especially because it'll get drier since it's elevated. You're having to water that more frequently and you're not having any additional benefits of purifying the stormwater. Now, this one isn't exactly fair, comparison, an extended detention basin versus a constructed wetland, but they're both removing pollutants by slowing the water down. You know, there are those limitations around having constructed wetlands in Colorado, but really is just showcasing that the stormwater can look different than it has in the past. What are the opportunities that we have to have more green infrastructure in our communities? Here is an example of permeable pavers being cleaned and then traditional road sweeping. So how can we, if we're installing these green infrastructure strategies, but we're already doing some measures to clean our streets, it isn't a very large jump to go from street sweeping on a regular basis to make sure that we're cleaning our streets, which is protecting our stormwater, to doing regular maintenance and sweeping of our permeable pavers, especially when you already have those trucks and that infrastructure built in. So what now? You know, what is the perfect solution? Should we have all green infrastructure? Should we rip out all of our gray infrastructure? You know, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that all gray infrastructure is bad or that we should only have green infrastructure. But we really need to look at how can they work together? How can we incorporate, as we're moving forward, more green infrastructure solutions rather than just saying, okay, well, we have a new development, let's just put in gray. Opening up that conversation to allowing more discussion about what are the benefits that we can get. Additionally, one of the other solutions and one of the other mindsets is a one water approach. And this mindset is looking at all of our water sources. How do they work together? How can we have that multiple benefits of economic and environmental and social benefits? A real systems approach to our water instead of having water looked at in silos. You know, the water conservation folks don't talk to the stormwater folks who don't talk to our wastewater folks. And we really need to start breaking down those barriers so that we can talk to each other and have this integrated view of our water systems, especially in light of the drought that we're encountering and our reduced ability to have our water resources. Really looking at a watershed scale thinking and action. The right size solutions for the right place. What is the best strategy for our particular solution? Having effective partnerships, and then of course that equity and inclusion and engagement of all in this process, that we can have healthy waterways and sustainable agriculture systems. The one water approach does not value one use of water above another, that they're all equally valuable, and that we all need to look at the full spectrum of our water resources and kind of a water budget approach. We have this many inputs of water and we have this many outputs of water. What is the best water use for each of these different uses? So example, should we be using stormwater for our landscape versus our drinking water for our landscape? Having thriving cities, but also making sure that we have social and economic inclusion. So what do some of these strategies look like? Also kind of on this slide here, I have included the link for the U.S. Water Alliance roadmap on the one water approach, which is a really interesting document if you're looking at learning more about that approach. And these should look familiar. Integrated one water development approaches are green infrastructure approaches a lot of the time. We're looking at how can we have these multiple uses, having our landscape needs met and our stormwater needs met by saying, you know, in our drought solutions, we don't need to just put rock. That isn't what we want for our communities, and we don't have to do that. By looking at our stormwater options, we can still have this vibrant landscape and conserve our water. Permeable pavement, you have that driving surface, and you have water infiltrating and purifying our water quality. Green roofs, we have reduced stormwater that's impacting our streets, reduced heat island effect. We're having more green space available. So again, that multifaceted approach of water. And then I didn't talk about this today, but gray water is another use that would be an integrated one water approach by using our water more than one time. Okay, tools. It's time to get to work. I know everyone's really excited about implementing all of the green infrastructure. So I want to put some tools in your hands to use so you know how to move forward. One of this great resource that I recently found was with the Sonoran Institute. They have this webpage on integrating water and land use planning and case studies. So if you're thinking about implementing a certain type of ordinance, you can go to their page and see, has anyone else done this? What happened? How did they do it? How is it going? Because having those examples of how other communities have integrated more green infrastructure and how they have encouraged green infrastructure to be one of the approaches that is used by their developers. That is so helpful. We don't have to recreate the wheel. We can use the examples that we have in other communities to help us move forward more effectively. The Sonoran Institute also has the Growing Water Smart program. They have this in Colorado, as well as Arizona and California. But this is a program all about breaking down those silos by getting our folks in water conservation and drinking water and wastewater and stormwater all to talk to each other about how to make our communities more resilient. It's a program that Northern Water has done a lot of work with the Sonoran Institute on this as well. And many communities up and down the Front Range have utilized this. And I highly encourage you to look more into this program if you're interested in learning more. Another toolkit that is available from the Water Now Alliance is called the Tap into Resilience Toolkit. This has a number of resources on and examples on how to do green infrastructure, why you should do green infrastructure, and then looking at kind of those case studies too. And if you're thinking, well, I wish there was a tool that would enable me to look at the different solutions that would be potential stormwater management, but I don't know which one to use and how much it would cost, that is what this tool is for. So the classic tool is from the One Water Solutions Institute at Colorado State University. The Stormwater Center that I'm a part of is under the One Water Solutions Institute and really focuses on creating tools that are GIS that people can use to make decisions. And so this particular tool will enable you to look at what are the social and environmental benefits of different stormwater infrastructure, the life cycle costs, what happens if you change water infrastructure, what happens to water quality. And then by using those different scenarios, you can also see potential costs and cost savings by switching out which type of infrastructure you would use. This tool is free, and so the link to access it is there. And then costs are such an important factor when deciding what infrastructure strategy to use. And so this is the Green Values Calculator. And so if you navigate to this website listed above, and then click on the launch tool, it will take you to this particular calculator. This is the page that it'll bring you to. And this is nationwide. This is not just Colorado, but you can still get an idea if you are trying to determine what types of different green infrastructure strategies would cost. And so this will allow you to kind of do the same thing of if I switch it to 2 tree boxes or 2 tree filters and 1 rain garden for my project site, how much would that cost? And so you can change the parameters in this tool and just get an idea of different strategies costs. And if you're in Colorado and you would like kind of a more Colorado focused cost, the Mile High Flood District has another tool. It is in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. And it's hard to see from my picture here, but this, the website that I have listed will take you to that page. And then you can scroll to the bottom of the page and select BMP sizing. And you will download this Excel spreadsheet, but also a PDF of what all these different green infrastructure types are. And then you can go in and put your costs in. There's another tool that you could use to estimate what is the best type of strategy to use for your site. Since we're having, since the floods are very, very real in our communities right now, we're much more likely to have large flood events after a fire. The Navigate the Flood resource is especially relevant at this time. This resource is also free. All of the resources that I'm sharing with you are free. So this resource will help you really look at how resilient is your community. What are some challenges that your community might have? Help you with the vision and goals for your future, and then choose what community solutions would be best, and then putting in that plan into action. So the Navigate the Flood is actually a part of the Tap into Resilience toolkit and one of the many tools at your disposal for moving forward. The final tool I wanted to highlight is the Equitable Infrastructure Toolkit. As I mentioned before, our lower income areas and our vulnerable populations are the ones that are hit the hardest with climate change. When we have extreme flood events, when we have fires, air quality. And so as we move forward into making our communities more resilient, having that focus on equity is really critical. And so this toolkit really talks about all the ways that you can incorporate equity into your, future planning. And this is by the River Network. So how can these changes be accomplished? How can we move our communities in the right direction? One of the really key ways that we can make some substantial change is through partnerships. Like today, we're having a great partnership here to offer this education. Having diverse representation, because that allows different questions to be asked in the planning process. When we're looking at incorporating stormwater infrastructure, having representation from low-income communities so that those questions are being addressed. Is equity being a part of this process? Utilizing existing resources. We don't have to recreate the wheel. Green infrastructure is not new. There are communities doing it extremely well. How can we really have an advancing point, a jumping off point from what they have already done? And then breaking down the silos. We don't need to be doing stormwater management planning in a box. We can work with all of our other water resource managers and talk about how we can build sustainable communities together, because all of our work intersects. And think about, what do we want our cities and land to look like now in the future? We had, decades ago, we had people having these conversations around what we wanted what they wanted Colorado to look like, how they could protect our water resources for us. And now it's our time to do that planning. Now it is our time to protect those water resources for our future generations. And so as we look forward to these solutions, it's for us in our present, as drought, as floods are very relevant to us now. But really, these solutions that we're putting in place are protecting Colorado and saving it as a place that we know and love for future generations too. And by integrating One Water solutions into future planning, that can be one of the ways that we accomplish that. A lot of the tools, actually all of the tools that I have illustrated today will be discussed in greater detail at the Colorado Stormwater Symposium next week. And so we have these 3 different sessions on fire impacts on water quality, green infrastructure examples, since that is something that people need to see, are those examples, and then the tools that you need to really move forward with getting green infrastructure strategies into your communities. So if you're interested, it is only $25 to attend, and registration is still available. I also have this in Spanish as well. And then I wanted to have my contact information for you. I love talking about green infrastructure. If you have any questions after this presentation, feel free to reach out to me, and then also have the Stormwater Center website there for you too. And I have a lot of resources and links in kind of one place. So the green values calculator that I discussed, and the EPA resources are all here under the green infrastructure cost analysis tools. Funding opportunities. The list of funding opportunities is not extensive here. If you are interested in finding more resources around funding, please let me know. And then the EPA has a lot of webcasts on green infrastructure, different topics. They also have a mailing list, and they do free webinars all the time. And so if you're interested, you can sign up on their list and learn about those as they come available. They have all of these different articles on performance, on overcoming barriers. And then there's also an article specifically on green infrastructure in the semi-arid West, which is us. And so there are different strategies for us just focused in on what works best here. All of these resources are also available here in Spanish, just translated. And then the integrating water into land use planning resources. I have several different guidebooks, the guidebook here from the Western Resource Advocates, and then those links to the Growing Water Smart Program, River Network, and then the case studies that I mentioned too. And also the One Water Solutions Institute that I mentioned, the classic tool specifically, but there's also other resources and research that the One Water Solutions Institute does that are available through these links on our website. And then I'd like to open it up for any questions that you have now. We covered a lot of material and want to be sure to answer any questions that you have on green infrastructure. And I also know that Northern Water is going to be doing, installing several green infrastructure strategies into their build out. And I'm not sure if Frank would like to mention what those would be.
That's right, Jessica. We are seeking to incorporate a number of these solutions into the future phases of the campus we have here down in Berthoud. So that might look like bioswales, perhaps a rain garden, and we might even get into some permeable pavement with some of those pavers. So some of those are yet to be discovered, but what we hope to do with them is not only have them for use on the campus, but also interpret them with signage so people can see how they're functioning when they come to visit.
Great. Looking forward to that. And I did have a question if all of the classes are going to be available in Spanish. And I'm really glad you asked that question. So the 3 classes that are part of the Stormwater education series that we're doing with Northern Water, the next one is the rain gardens, and then the last one is the extended detention basin. Those are all bilingual. And at the Colorado Stormwater Center, we're also working on translating all of our content into Spanish. This is going to be a big effort, but in 2022, I am hopeful that we're going to be able to start offering an increased number of classes in Spanish, also our certifications in Spanish. And so I hope to be able to offer more opportunities soon. If there are classes that you would like to see in Spanish, please put them in the chat. And if they are, even if they're not stormwater related, because as Frank and I are working, with different municipalities, there are potentially opportunities to have more classes in Spanish on different water topics too. So please include those, and we would like to make those opportunities available as well. And if everyone's feeling shy and didn't have any questions, then again, you can reach out to us at any point. But we will definitely answer any questions that you have now too.
I actually did have one quick question about green roofs, and I was wondering if there are any residential applications for green roofs, or if those are really only practical in kind of larger, more commercial buildings.
I've actually seen a green roof put on a birdhouse. And I honestly think that it's probably too expensive to put them on the residential application. But I think it just depends. Right now, it makes more sense to put them in the commercial application just because they're flat. The commercial houses are flat, and that's what you need more so for the green roofs. I have seen them also installed on peaked roofs, but then that is it's not infiltrating, it's a sloped surface. It's less infiltration happening. Especially in our climate, you're potentially having to water those spaces more. By having it flat, that enables, the same precipitation to hit all of the vegetation. In areas that get more water, I have seen those kind of pitched roof lines with green roofs. So I think it just depends. It can be, but you also need to kind of understand like what benefits do you get versus what are the potential costs of upkeep for that system. And then also, will you have to water it extensively? The one that I've seen utilized with a pitched roof was in Portland, Oregon. And they loved their green roof. And it worked really well because they were trying to reduce the amount of water they had sitting around their house. And so anyway, yes, I think that would be a really neat study to see. We also have part of the symposium, Dr. Jennifer Busolo, who is an expert in green roofs, and she will be talking about green roofs for our second session of the symposium. And so I will ask her this question too, to see if she's seeing a lot of green roofs in Colorado, kind of at the residential level, and then I can follow up with you as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Carolyn said that Betty Ford Garden in Vail has used a green roof on one of their buildings. And I actually just visited the Betty Ford Garden in Vail, and it was fantastic. It is just a beautiful garden. And I'm trying to remember, actually, I do remember their green roof on one of their buildings. And they are a botanical garden. And also the gardens on Spring Creek in Fort Collins has a green roof on their building, one of their shade shelters, but it is irrigated. And I have seen that. And actually that roof is also pitched, but they had to run irrigation to their green roof to keep the vegetation alive there. So there are examples of it being used, but I haven't run across any examples in like neighborhoods of green roofs happening or becoming popular here. And thank you, Lindsay. She put the more trainings available at their website, and also the Stormwater Symposium registration link. Thank you very much. Any other questions before I give you a little bit more time back in your day? Well, thank you all so much for attending, for your attention to this really important topic, and for joining us on our first of our stormwater education series. And I'll pass it over to Frank to conclude.
I echo Jessica's sentiments. I appreciate everybody's time and joining us for this first session. So I hope you were able to utilize some of the information you heard. And then as you walk around, you'll see these examples in our region. And if you're working on a project, hopefully you'll know a little bit more about it and the benefits it provides and how to maintain. I look forward to seeing you at the next sessions, which you can register here or on northernwater.org under water efficient use. Pass it back to you, Jessica.
Thank you. And we'll be following up. Like I said, you'll all receive the PowerPoint presentations and the recording. The symposium had another question. The symposium is not going to be in Spanish, unfortunately, this year. Would like to offer that opportunity at a later date. So apologies, the symposium will not be in Spanish. And then I will just conclude. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks all. Have a great day.